The US Embassy just ordered its own non-emergency staff to pack their bags and leave Abuja. Not quietly, officially, on April 8, 2026. And while everyone online is debating whether America is overreacting, nobody is asking the real question. What intelligence did the US government receive that we are not being told about? Because here's what's wild. The State Department didn't just raise the alarm, they expanded their do not travel blacklist to cover 23 Nigerian states. 23. That's not a security advisory, that's almost a countrywide red card. So, before we talk about the visas, we need to talk about what they know that Abuja isn't saying. Stay with me. Before we go deeper, if you're just finding Naija Newsfeed, welcome. This channel exists to break down what's really happening in Nigerian politics. No noise, no spin, no agenda. Just facts and sharp analysis. The only way you can help me keep doing this is by hitting that subscribe button right now. It costs you nothing, but it means everything to this channel. I'm building something here, and I need you to be part of it. Subscribe. Let's go. Let's lay out exactly what happened and in what order, because the sequence here matters. Step 1. On April 9, 2026, hours after the U.S. Department of State authorized the departure of non-emergency government employees and their families from Abuja Embassy, the U.S. mission in Nigeria announced the cancellation of all visa appointments at the embassy. Step 2. Alongside that, the State Department placed Nigeria under Level 3, Reconsider Travel, while designating specific states under the highest possible category, Level 4, Do Not Travel. Step 3. The states flagged under Level 4 are not random. They include Borno, Jigawa, Kogi, Kwara, Niger, Plateau, Taraba, Yobe, and parts of Adamawa, all cited for terrorism, crime, and kidnapping. And Plateau, Jigawa, Kwara, Niger, and Taraba were newly added in this latest update, states in the Middle Belt where farmer-herder conflicts have intensified. Step 4. The federal government of Nigeria responded by describing the U.S. travel notice as unbalanced and urged international partners to provide more accurate and up-to-date assessments of the country's security situation. Now, the visa situation itself is actually layered. There's two separate crises running at the same time, and most people are confusing them. There's the embassy closure in Abuja, and then there's the broader visa suspension that predates this. As of January 1, 2026, in line with Presidential Proclamation 10998, the Department of State partially suspended visa issuance to nationals of 19 countries, Nigeria included, for non-immigrant B1/B2 visitor visas and F/M/J student and exchange visitor visas. So, even before this embassy closure drama, Nigerians were already being squeezed at the visa window. This week's closure is a second blow on top of a wound that was already open. But here's the thing nobody is telling you. Who actually benefits from Nigeria looking this unstable right now? We'll come back to that. Let's talk about the mechanics, because understanding the rules helps you understand who is breaking them. On the US side, the authority behind all of this flows from presidential proclamations. The White House invoked its authority under the argument that radical Islamic terrorist groups such as Boko Haram and the Islamic State operate freely in certain parts of Nigeria, which creates substantial screening and vetting difficulties. They also cited Nigeria's B1/B2 visa overstay rate of 5.56% and F/M/J visa overstay rate of 11.90% as justification. That's the official paper trail. The US president has broad constitutional powers to restrict entry of foreign nationals on national security grounds, and those powers have been used aggressively since 2025. On the Nigerian side, the Constitution places the primary responsibility for national security on the federal government. Section 14, subsection 2, subsection B of the Nigerian Constitution states that the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary purpose of government. The SIAs, DSS, NIA, Nigerian Army, Police all report ultimately to the president. Yet, here we are with 23 states flagged. The gray area being exploited. Nigeria's Minister of Information described the U.S. advisory as a routine precaution based on internal protocols, stressing that it does not reflect the overall security situation in the country. That framing is deliberately vague, because routine precaution doesn't explain why non-emergency diplomatic staff were told to physically leave the country. The US doesn't evacuate diplomatic staff on vibes. This is a protocol-driven decision. When staff leave, it means threat intelligence reached a threshold. The question is, what was the threshold?
Who benefits from Nigeria looking this unstable? Let's start domestically. We are heading toward 2027. The political machine is already warming up. Any administration approaching an election cycle has an incentive to either downplay insecurity, which Abuja is doing, or weaponize it, depending on which side of the fence you sit on. The Tinubu administration has a clear political interest in projecting stability. The federal government reiterated its commitment to sustaining security improvements and ensuring the safety of citizens and visitors, assuring that Nigeria remains a safe and welcoming destination. That's a political statement as much as it is a security one. But look at the geography of the states flagged. The advisory expanded the highest risk category to include Plateau, Jigawa, Kwara, Niger, and Taraba, largely Middle Belt and Northern states. These are not APC strongholds in the usual sense. They are swing territory. The political implications of those regions being internationally branded as do not travel zones cannot be overstated. On the international side, Washington's motives. The US is not a neutral actor here. The White House proclamation explicitly cited Boko Haram and the Islamic State operating freely in parts of Nigeria as justification for the visa suspension. But critics have pointed out that this is also consistent with the broader Trump-era immigration policy, which has targeted African nations with high visa overstay rates. Nigeria made that list. So, is this purely about security, or is there a bilateral political signal being sent? Nigeria rejected an asylum deal with the US. The US Embassy itself stated the visa restrictions were unrelated to Nigeria's rejection of that asylum deal, but that denial itself tells you people were asking the question. The silent players. Watch the security and intelligence establishment within Nigeria. These are the people who actually know what threat triggered the American response, and they are not talking publicly. The DSS, the Office of the National Security Advisor, they received the same intelligence briefings that moved the US. Their silence is a data point. Watch also the diaspora visa pipeline. Hundreds of thousands of Nigerians had appointments pending. Students, professionals, families reuniting. The economic and social cost of this closure falls hardest on the middle class, the same demographic that is the loudest political voice on social media. Here is something that should shift how you see this. The US consulate in Lagos is still open. Only Abuja is closed. That distinction is not random. It tells you the threat in the US government's assessment is concentrated around the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, the seat of power. Timeline of moves. January 1, 2026, US suspends B1/E2, F, M, and J visas for Nigerians under Presidential Proclamation 10998. Early April 2026, State Department authorizes departure of non-emergency embassy staff from Abuja. April 9, 2026, official authorized departure order signed. April 9 to 10, 2026, federal government pushes back, calls advisory unbalanced. Nigerian social media erupts. Citizens express fear that the US may have received classified intelligence about an imminent attack in Abuja. Now, if what I just broke down surprised you, drop it in the comments. Tell me, do you think the US government knows something the Nigerian government isn't telling us? Because the second part of this analysis, the part about what happens next, changes everything. And the only way you'll catch it is if you are subscribed. Hit that button right now. This channel only grows when you choose to be part of it, and every subscriber genuinely helps me make better content. Let's zoom out. Economic consequences. Nigeria's visa-dependent middle class is hemorrhaging opportunity. Students have lost semester placements, business travelers have lost deals, families have lost reunion windows. This is not abstract. Every cancelled appointment is a real human cost. But the bigger economic signal is this. When a major global power like the US formally expands a do not travel advisory to cover nearly two-thirds of your country, foreign direct investment follows that signal. Businesses use these advisories, insurance companies use them, boards use them. Nigeria was already struggling to attract consistent FDI. This makes that harder. Security implications. The advisory raised concerns about emergency healthcare, noting that hospitals often require immediate cash payments, ambulance services are unreliable, and blood supply systems are inconsistent. Medical facilities in Nigeria generally do not meet US or European standards, and evacuation may be necessary in medical emergencies. That's an indictment not just of security, but of the entire state infrastructure. The Middle Belt dimension. The addition of Plateau State, the site of persistent farmer-herder violence, is significant. This conflict has ethnic and resource dimensions that go beyond Boko Haram. It signals that the US sees Nigeria's insecurity as diversifying, not concentrating. That is a more dangerous picture. The federal government says things are fine. The US embassy is saying, get out. One of them has access to intelligence, the other doesn't want acknowledged. Decide for yourself which one you trust. This has genuine international dimensions, so let's go there. The US-Nigeria relationship is at one of its most transactional and tense points in years. On one hand, Nigeria is America's largest trading partner in sub-Saharan Africa. On the other, the White House explicitly named Nigeria in a presidential proclamation alongside countries described as having identity management and information sharing inadequacies that are sufficient to justify entry restrictions. That is a diplomatic statement dressed in legal language. What Nigerian diaspora Nigerians need to understand: if you hold a Nigerian passport and you are outside the US right now without a valid visa, the January 2026 proclamation affects you directly. Presidential Proclamation 10998 only applies to foreign nationals who are outside the US on the effective date and do not hold a valid visa. If you are inside the US with a valid visa, you are currently fine. But renewals, new applications, student visas, all of that is frozen or severely restricted. The global pattern. This connects to a broader hardening of Western immigration posture towards African nations, particularly under the current US administration. Nigeria is not alone. It shares the list with countries across West and Southern Africa. But Nigeria's size, diaspora population, and strategic oil relationship make its inclusion carry disproportionate weight. Earlier, I asked who benefits from Nigeria looking unstable. Here is the answer. Nobody in Nigeria benefits. The only winners are the political operatives who use insecurity narratives as electoral ammunition and the criminal networks that thrive in ungoverned spaces. The ordinary Nigerian citizen, they lose on every front.
Let's cut through the noise because there's a lot of it on this story. Misconception number 1. The US is just overreacting. This is the most common dismissal, and it's the weakest argument. The US does not evacuate diplomatic staff over social media panic. Authorized departures are triggered by specific threat assessments from intelligence channels. Many Nigerians believe the embassy's move is based on classified security intelligence. That instinct is probably correct. The question is what specifically that intelligence contains. Misconception number 2. This is all about Trump's anti-Africa agenda. There's truth in this, but it's incomplete. The visa restrictions under Presidential Proclamation 10998 are part of a broader pattern of immigration hardening. But the embassy closure and staff evacuation is a separate, operationally driven decision. Those two things happening simultaneously is a coincidence that deserves scrutiny, but they are not the same decision made by the same people for the same reason. Misconception number 3. Nigeria is completely fine. The government says so. The Minister of Information stated there is no general breakdown of law and order, and the vast majority of the country remains stable. That may be technically true in certain states, but 23 states on a risk advisory, including 5 newly added in April 2026, suggests that stable is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence.
The strongest opposition argument, one could argue that the US advisories are partly shaped by domestic American political calculations, painting the world as dangerous to justify restrictive immigration policy. That's a legitimate critique, but it doesn't explain the staff evacuation. What happens next, and what should you be watching for? Most likely moves. The Tinubu administration will continue to publicly push back while privately engaging US counterparts through back channels. Expect no dramatic public confrontations. They need that relationship intact heading into 2027. The US Embassy will reopen for visa appointments in Abuja when its threat assessment changes, but the broader visa suspension under Proclamation 10998 requires a new presidential action to reverse. That is unlikely in the current US political climate. Nigerians with pending applications will face prolonged uncertainty. The Lagos consulate will become increasingly overloaded. Signals to watch. If Abuja experiences a significant security incident in the coming weeks, it will confirm that the US intelligence was accurate and the political fallout for the Tinubu government will be severe. If the Middle Belt farmer-herder violence intensifies further, expect more states to be added to the Level 4 list. Watch Nigeria's engagement at the UN and AU level. Any attempt to formally challenge the advisory through multilateral channels would signal that Nigeria is taking this more seriously than the public statements suggest. Best case. The specific threat that triggered the evacuation is neutralized, the advisory is quietly downgraded, and visa appointments resume with delays but no permanent damage. Nigeria accelerates reforms on identity management and information sharing that the US cited as deficiencies. Worst case, a security incident occurs near Abuja, the advisory escalates, other embassies follow the US lead, Nigeria's international image takes a sustained hit just as the 2027 campaign cycle begins and the government has no credible security narrative left to run on. I asked at the start, what does the US know that Abuja isn't saying? Based on everything we've covered, the honest answer is we don't know the specific intelligence, but the pattern of behavior, staff evacuation, expanded do not travel list, visa suspension, tells you the US is treating Nigeria as a country with an unstable capital. Whether that assessment is perfectly calibrated or politically amplified doesn't change what it costs ordinary Nigerians. So, let's close the loop. I opened this video by asking what intelligence did the US receive that we aren't being told about? The honest answer is that we may never know the classified specifics, but here's what we do know. When a country's security situation deteriorates to the point where a global superpower pulls its own staff out and blacklists nearly 2/3 of your territory, that is not a PR problem. That is a governance problem. Nigeria's insecurity is not new, but it's spread from the northeast into the Middle Belt, from rural areas towards the federal capital, is a different phase of the same crisis, and the international response to that spread has now begun to land directly on the pockets and the futures of ordinary Nigerians who have nothing to do with Boko Haram, banditry, or politics. The question is not whether America is being fair. The question is, which way is Nigeria actually going? If this breakdown gave you clarity, if it shifted how you see what's really happening, do one thing for me. Share this video with one person who needs to understand this. And if you're not subscribed yet, please do it now. I want to be direct with you. Subscribing is genuinely the only way you can help me keep making content at this level. No sponsors, no paymasters, just this community. Every subscriber tells YouTube this channel matters. So hit subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.